Hello and welcome to Breaking Boxes with No Fun Dave, where we are going to look at a lunatic's view of health and longevity and prosperity and just being full of life on a daily basis, and what we can look at, what we can do, and what we can aspire to in health in our day-to-day life. Now, I have to warn you out front legally that you cannot take none of my advice here on health is uh, is approved. I am not a licensed medical professional in any state, in any country around the world, in any world. But I am somebody who loves truth and loves digging into things, and I love the topic of health because I only have this body. I've only got one, and when I'm done with it, or I should say, when it's done with me, that's it. That's all the life on this earth that I have. And so take everything that I say with a grain of salt, with a grain of eating the meat and spitting out the bones. This is meant to pique your interest and start digging into things yourself as to how our bodies work, what they are, why we have these bodies, and treat yours on a daily basis so that you can be full of energy, full of life, full of joy, without pain, and just enjoy life in the body that you have for the time that you have it. So I want to talk first about what health is, because we often say, "Oh, I want to get more healthy." Well, what does that mean? If you ask different people, you're going to get different answers. If you ask a guy who spends his days in the gym doing fitness and muscle building, you're gonna hear about health is being really strong with great muscle definition and good cardio length, and has the right eating regime as far as proteins and fats and carbs. And that's the answer. Well, that's health. Okay. Well, if you ask somebody you ask a lady from Southern California, and they're going to tell you that health is flat stomach, defined and thin arms, no bulging anywhere, with skin that's smooth and moist. You're going to get a different answer than the guy that's in the gym. Meanwhile, you ask somebody who's let's call it a heavyweight trades worker, somebody who's working with masonry and concrete and that kind of stuff, and they're gonna say, well, it's the ability to work every day without being in pain, and being able to show up and lift what I need to lift and move what I need to move, and get home at the end of the day and not be dead tired. Or anyway, so depending on who you ask, you're going to get a different answer on health. And I think it that all summarizes into something a little bit bigger. So I wrote down my view of health, my expectations of my body, my targets, what I'm trying to do in life, and maybe you get a couple ideas in it. So I said that being healthy was being able to not be sick when sickness abounds. So being able to fend off illnesses and sicknesses that are around you. It's being able to walk, run, swim, flex, hike, snowboard, bike at any time, to be able to do the things that I want to do well, consistently, and without pain. It's being able to have energy from the time that I wake up until the time that I go to bed. It's being able to change my sleeping schedule without problem, being able to sleep a little if I have to, or sleep a lot if I have to, or change time zones if I have to. It's being able to recover quickly from strenuous activity. It's being able to build and keep new muscle and new skills. So having the strength and the rebuilding capability in my body to be able to build muscle and to learn new skills. To be attentive of thought, of intelligence, and memory. So health has to do with cognitive function, with memory and thought. To me, it's to be full of life, to be able to be joyful and loving and caring, and to lift those up around me, and to have the mental capacity and the emotional capacity to care for others. It's being able to do the things in life that you want to do when you want to do them. And so that's a a big thing. A big thing. I would say another is to not be reliant on a pill to feel a certain way. Because it certainly isn't the pill. It certainly isn't the lack of the pill that is causing the problem. There's a problem in your body that is exhibiting in pain, and the pill might fix the feeling of it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was the lack of the pill that caused the problem. So it's also being able to diagnose problems in my own body and to understand what's happening in my own body and to be able to fix them. Muscle soreness or tightness. There's instances where we break a bone or we break a muscle or we cut ourselves. There's an injury, but then there's muscle pain, which is chronic, which is ongoing, and those kinds of things can be fixed because there was a cause, there was an effect, and when we understand them, then we can reverse that and make it better than it was, but also aiming for flexibility. Right now, I'm working on hip flexibility specifically because my hips aren't as flexible as I want them to be. Because when I'm hiking, if I have to stretch and reach my leg up a large stone, it hurts a bit or it pulls a bit. And it's like, well, I don't want that. I want to be able to do the things that I want to do when I want to do them, which in this case means that I have to lift my leg up to high places to be able to hike with a big backpack on and not have a headache from carrying a backpack, which means that my shoulders need to. Anyways, so this is a huge topic. There's a huge undertaking that I'm trying to do in one podcast, but I want to set the foundation that health doesn't have to mean that when you go to the doctor once a year and get a checkup, they say, oh, your blood pressure is good and you don't seem to be sick and you don't have any pain. That's it. That's the baseline. It seems way too small of a goal as far as health is concerned to me, because there's so much more that we can do with our bodies when it's working well, when we have energy, when we exude life, when we lift up those around us. All of that has to do with health. And it doesn't just mean what you eat. It's what you eat and what you do. And it's like, oh, well, this is too big. I can't even approach this topic now because I don't have time to spend 2 hours in the day in the gym. Well, I guess what? I don't go to the gym ever. The last time I was at a gym with weights was probably it was 2 years ago when I was specifically learning how to hit the golf ball 30 yards further off the tee, which I was able to do, but I needed to go to the gym to have some specific muscle isolation to do that. But I mean, I don't go to the gym, and clearly I'm still strong. I'm not going to be in a bodybuilding contest by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm strong and I'm flexible, and I do everything that I do muscle wise, fitness wise, calisthenically or on the floor against a wall. And I don't even have to make time for it. I just do it throughout the day. But that's only part of it. There's part of, hey, you need to keep your muscles working and growing, but you also need to keep your blood flowing, and you need to keep your muscles repairing, and you need to feed your brain what it needs in order to process well. Our bodies are incredible, and if we treat them right, by understanding what is right, what they were intended for, it's amazing the things that you can do. So it starts with understanding what our body is. Where did it come from? Why is it here? And what is it? Who made the thing? And there's two different thought processes or worldviews, shall we say, that help us understand. So there's two different views of world history, of two different worldviews that you can look at that are the predominant worldviews of where our bodies are, what they came from. And the first is that of evolution, and billions of years, the universe conspired to explode and shot off into space a whole bunch of molecules and chemicals, which gathered together into stars and solar systems and galaxies. And then our Earth cooled over millions of years to about 4.6 billion years ago, where in the water, it rained on the rocks for millions of years. And out of that primordial soup came life, and life swam around in the ocean for several million years, and then came up onto land and is changed through natural selection, and death brings change. So That idea that we came from a bunch of chemicals over a long period of time would indicate that a whole bunch of chemicals and processes would make our bodies to be more functional, more appropriate. And so that view that chemicals makes health is the one that's predominant in our world. You go to the doctor and they prescribed you a drug. That's basically the process. The doctors that are trained in today's medical um, practice are trained in drug um, prescriptioning and treatment. So you're not going to go to the doctor that's schooled in that and get, okay, well, you need to change these behaviors and these foods that you're eating, and you got to do this to make your blood flow better. No, you got to add a drug that will make your blood pressure different, or you got to add a drug that will um, um, supplement for something that your body isn't doing. So instead of encouraging the body to do what it's doing better, it's add another chemical in order to change that. And if that's the worldview that is true, great. Then that's going to produce results that make us the best possible humans that we can be. The other view is that we were designed and created by someone or something, and that design was intended to function a certain way, and that designer also gave us other things that we are to consume and do and eat, and a way to function which would make our bodies run better. And if that's true, then those things that the designer or creator made will make the creation, being our bodies, run better. And a topic for another very long series of podcasts, which I will gladly tackle. What I'm talking about today is based on the second worldview, which is that we were made by a designer, that our bodies were designed, and that there are certain things that we do within our body that, or within the world, that was also designed and created. And by doing those things and eating those things, we function better or function optimally. Now, something that you have to understand in that worldview is that according to this designer who claimed to give us a book to read that gives us instruction on how to live life and live it well, he also says that we're not living in the world as he created it. Okay, so there was, to give you a brief history lesson, according to, we're talking about the Bible specifically, but according to the creator and what he says, hey, I've created you, this is how you should live. A brief history overview is that he says in this book, take it for what it's worth, that the earth and universe were created approximately 6,000 years ago. And in that creation, he made us as humans to live forever on this earth. And then there was a breaking of the one law that there was, and the result of that was going to be death. And that death started at that point, but they didn't physically die until 900 to 1,000 years later. So this creation that God had made before the flood, meaning before this big change that happened, and we'll cover that in just a second, people were meant to live forever. And after that, they were told that they were going to die. They still lived to be, 920, 950, 965 was the oldest recorded person in that portion of history, and so that's certainly a lot longer than we have today. So one of the things that we can do is instead of basing our view of success and health on just what we have today, just looking at the people who are living to be 100 or 105 or 110, who are still mobile and walking and moving around and living life joyfully, instead of basing it on that, we can incorporate some of the things that we understand from before this big change, and implement that into our lives. So continuing on the history lesson, 6,000 years ago, God created everything, and people were meant to live forever. They ended up living 950-ish years instead of forever, because of laws that they broke prior. Then there came a point where God said, I'm going to change this and he sent a worldwide flood. And this flood covered the whole earth and changed the whole makeup of things. And if you look at the genealogies of the Bible, you've got 950, 935, 960 years old that people are living. And then the flood happened, and the people who were born before the flood still lived to be a total of 900 years, but their kids only lived to be 500 years old, and then 400 years old, and then 250 years old, and then 200 years old, and so much so that one of the characters in the Bible, you got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When Jacob was on his deathbed, he was recorded as saying, "Few and evil have the years of my pilgrimage been," and he was 200 years old. So, I mean, today's standards, holy smokes, you're 200. That's a lot of years. But he knew people who were 400 and 500 and even 700 years old. So the ages quickly decreased as the world changed post worldwide flood, and a lot of different things would have changed. And so when we look back into the fossil record, the burying of the bones and the trees and everything else that was compressed into coal and all those kinds of things that happened about 4,400 years ago, you can get a glimpse or a picture of what life was like before the flood. Now, certainly we can't get a full picture because we're not there, and we can't repeat history, and it's not scientific because it's not repeatable, testable, and demonstratable. I can't go back to before the flood to tell you what the situation was like, what life was like. But I can tell you what the recorded historians of the Bible said about what happened before the flood, and we have some indications from Psalms also of some snippets of that we can piece together. Additionally, in the fossil record, there's some really weird things. We find some really big things, like these big dinosaurs, these giant dinosaurs that are, many feet long, many feet tall. These big creatures. But we also find big other stuff that we don't have big ones of today. For instance, we have giant sloths. Well, are they different than regular sloths? I don't know. There's none living today. There were giant sloths back then. We find giant bears. We find woolly mammoths. We find cockroaches that were 18 inches long. We find dragonflies with a 50-inch wingspan. We find palm trees that were huge. We find cattails that are sometimes 10 stories tall, 100 feet tall cattails that grow on the side of the river. We find huge leaves, and we find giant deposits of creatures that were buried very quickly all together, which means there was a whole lot of them at that time. We also find in the fossil record humans that were 9 and 10 and 14 feet tall, which is a whole lot taller than we're getting today. So, you're getting little snippets in museums of what we find in the fossil record, but predominantly in public forums, you're only getting the things that fit the narrative of the first worldview, which is the worldview that we came from a nothing explosion over millions or billions of years ago, and then gradually evolved out of the water into creatures and then onto land and to what we have today. And so if it doesn't fit that formula, then you don't get to see it. But if you dig enough, you can find some really, really interesting things. We can chat about that on another day. But in this fossil record, you see these giant people, you see these giant creatures, and you have a written record that they lived to be many, many years old. So, what changed? What was different back then that physically allowed people, our bodies, the same way they are now, to live that long? And the conditions would have had to been drastically different to be able to not die at 100. I mean, by 100 now, we're done. I don't say we're all dead. A lot of us are, but we're done. Our bodies are spent. They're recovered. They've been shot by UV rays so much that they're blasted apart and rebuilt and blasted apart and rebuilt until the point that our skin gets hard, things harden up, and we get to be much firmer, shall we say, and less pliable. And eventually our heart stops and we die. And so when we look at health, we got to look towards what's possible in our bodies and then take the bits of that we can and apply them to what we have today. So certainly we're not going to live to be 1,000. We're not going to live to be 10 or 12 or 14 feet tall. We're not going to grow that much, but we can take a few things that they had, some indications of things that they had, in order to make our lives and our recovery and our pain-freeness a little bit better. So the first thing that I would say is that there's been some really, really interesting new research about blood. Now, blood is important. It's a connective tissue. It's a liquid connective tissue that binds everything in our body together. Without blood, there is no life in our body. We got to get blood to and from where it goes, because in that blood it carries the oxygen to the muscles that we need and the cells that we need oxygen. It carries the bad stuff away, the discarded material away from those same areas. And the movement of that blood in our body is the predominant health factor in our life. I pulled up a list here of 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 problems that have to do with blood and circulation. And there's everything from hypertensive heart disease, rheumatic heart disease, valvular heart disease, cardiomyopathy, aortic aneurysms, heart arrhythmia, thrombosis. I'm sorry, I'm not a biological major, but our aortic aneurysms, carditis, congenital heart disease, myocardial infarction, heart failure. A lot of the death that happens around us is due to our heart and due to the blood, the blood congestion and things not flowing freely. And then as you get older, the blood doesn't flow to certain parts, and so you get limbs and extremities that don't feel right. Sometimes they have to be amputated, but you get no feeling in your feet or hands. Your blood flow system works less good. And I'm going to jump off jump onto the lunatic train here, and read you some recent stuff that's come out about how our heart works, how our blood works, how our body actually operates. And I'm gonna read it to you. This was published recently by Greg Reese, and it's citing work from Rudolf Steiner and Frank Chester, and is talking about the the blood and heart system, and how the heart doesn't necessarily pump. The heart is pumped, and it goes against the thinking that we learned in school, that we understand from how biology works. It's similar, but it's different, because its factors that you can change are greater and more easily accessible, which makes it really, really interesting. So what he says is that I'm going to skip forward a little bit in the reading, because so basically the heart, when pumped, isn't multiple muscles pumping one way and then the other and then one way and the other. That the muscle of the heart is actually one layered vorticide muscle. So basically, when your heart pumps, it's not pumping on, off, on, off. It's just continually pumping in a spinning motion. So this heart, which is a chestahedron shape, which is a seven-sided regular form, creates multiple spinning vortices. Now, vortex, you think of like a tornado or that kind of shape. The vortices that happen in water when water is flowing, they create eddies. That same counter-rotating vortices is what's happening in your heart. Now, recent scientific studies have shown that these two vortices facilitate the closing of the valves. And when the vortices don't form properly, that's when blood clots appear. Now, that's important because we don't want blood clots. So how do we keep these vortices and valves opening and closing properly? So this guy, Paco Torrent Gausp, known as the man who unfolded 1,000 hearts, discovered that the heart is a singular muscular band folded over itself in a spiraling pattern. Now, the heart itself is a vortex of tissue, and it's not a pump necessarily, it's a vortex machine. So for centuries, now this also goes into water and blood and how blood is formed and cell walls, but for centuries it was believed that matter could only exist in three states, such as water, which could exist as liquid, ice, and vapor. Well, human cells are 70% water, but most of this water is not in any of these three states. We've recently learned that with water, there's a fourth state. This fourth state is called the plasma state, or gel phase, exclusion zone, or structured water. Now, this is what pushes the blood through your entire cardiovascular system. pushes the blood through your cardiovascular system. And so I was actually watching a webcast last night, talking about how even if the heart is a pump, it's not physically possible for our heart to pump the blood through the hundreds of miles of um, of veins and capillaries and arteries that we have. And so there has to be something else at work. It can't just be the heart. So the structured water is what pushes your blood through the entire cardiovascular system. It's fueled by infrared energy from its environment, and the water in our body becomes an electrical propulsion system. So a certain percentage of the water in our body becomes structured water, and the rest remains normal liquid water or bulk water. This structured water becomes negatively charged and forms the gelatinous outer walls of our capillaries, veins, and arteries. These negatively charged outer walls continuously propel the positively charged bulk water within, carrying the blood with it. And this propulsion system will run indefinitely so long as it stays charged. Now, this was also looked at by a guy who patented a way to, or a method of moving oil through pipelines. And oil used to have to be moved through pipelines at really high pressures because the viscosity of the oil against the wall of the pipe was such that it needed a lot of pressure to be able to push this oil through. And so he developed a system where if you magnetized the the polarity of the pipe and the oil properly, it required a far less high pressure environment in order to move the oil through the pipe. So by changing the polarity, they were able to move the oil more freely through the pipe. And then he looked at blood vessels and veins as well and said, hey, the same thing's happening there. So this propulsion system will run indefinitely as long as it stays charged. And the way you charge it is with Earth's electromagnetic field, infrared energy, and positive thought. Ooh, that's interesting. That's very, very interesting, because another part in God's book to man, the Bible, he says, a merry heart does good like a medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. We'll revisit this in a bit, but joy and life and positivity does good to your body like a medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. And so there's actually an effect of how you think, how you talk, how you behave can affect how healthy or how well your blood does. So there's a couple things here: electromagnetic field, infrared energy, and positive thought. Now, Earth's magnetic field before the flood, was significantly higher. There was a layer of water above the atmosphere which changed the electromagnetic field of the Earth. It also filtered out some of the ultraviolet light and would have let through infrared light more effectively through this layer of water, and would have made the world a redder light. So kind of like at sunset, but more effectively throughout the day. So you'd be bombarded by this infrared energy throughout the day. You'd have a higher electromagnetic field, and your body would actually be in a state where you get more of this energy to charge the propulsion system that's moving the blood through your body and pumping your heart. So it's saying the blood is pumping the heart, not the heart is pumping the blood, which is counterintuitive. But then we have to now think of the health of our veins and vessels and circulatory system as being more important as far as the running of our heart, which gets really exciting and interesting, because we can change the electromagnetic field around us, and we can put in infrared light. I'm sure you've heard the craze lately that red light or infrared light devices can have benefits to our health, whether recovery or pain or growth. And so the actual shining of or inputting of the right light or the right energies into our body helps our blood flow better. Now, I'm going to put a caveat here and say that that doesn't mean that we're to worship the energy itself, or to say, oh, the red light is amazing, it's such a wonderful thing. It's that it's part of the system that God designed to be able to allow our bodies to work beautifully. So continuing along, the work of this Dr. Masaru Emoto has scientifically demonstrated that water exposed to loving human words and thoughts is transformed into its natural hexagonal shape on a molecular level. It becomes structured based on our positive intention. Now, if you spoke positive words to water, water will actually change. There's a physical change that happens. There's a scientific change that happens with joy and life and love and positive intention. And this new model shows that it is the blood that pumps the heart, not the other way around. And in order to keep the flow strong and healthy, our best medicine is to connect physically to the earth, to get sunlight, to love ourselves and others, and to experience with physical touch. And that this togetherness, this oneness of the human race is one of the main ways where the lifefulness of our body gets powered. So Victor Schoenberger spent his life studying water and found that in the natural world, water will always create vortices along its path. He learned that the spiral action is what structures the water in nature. And when subjected to modern man-made water treatment, it loses its structure. And so predominantly throughout our life, we're drinking unstructured or destructured water. So Schoenberg's work led him to believe that one could generate energy out of a vortex and made it as an implosion as opposed to an energy explosion. But as we put these things together, there's small little things that we can do to make our lives better. We can have more sunlight, we can have more joy, we can have more life and love, and just by adding some of these things, we can actually make our body better. Okay, so one of the other things, talking specifically about blood and its flow through our body, is it was thought for a long time that how do we say it? The thing which made our cardiovascular system run was oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen goes in through our lungs and then is carried to the cell where it needs to go, and then carbon dioxide is brought back and expelled back through the lungs and brought out. But there is a third molecule that is used in this process called nitric oxide, and nitric oxide regulates the elasticity of our endothelial cells. And these are what make up the cell wall linings of our vessels and our capillaries. In the capillaries, it's just those cells because they're the thinnest of the cell walls, and also makes up the blood-brain barrier, which filters out anything that shouldn't be going to the brain. And so you want to keep these things pliable because it allows for the opening and closing of the blood vessel itself, so that when your muscles call for more blood, then the vessel opens to allow the blood, allow more blood to that area. So your blood pressure doesn't have to go up in order to allow for more blood to get to where it needs to go. And this nitric oxide is found wonderfully in nature in some of the things that we eat. So it's found in dark colored, dark red things like strawberries, raspberries, beets. Beets are really heavy in it. Dark greens, dark reds have this nitric oxide in it, which allows your body to produce this nitric oxide and regulate the endothelial cells in your body, which is really cool because, hey, guess what? That's another thing that we can do that allows for our blood to move more freely. And if our blood moves more freely, then problems just kind of get washed away. There's heat is another thing that allows for the blood to move more freely, and so these infrared saunas, these heat treatments that you can get, your overall temperature of your body, if it's hotter, your blood will flow better through its veins. And so people have been finding that the use of some of these things, this increase in blood flow and blood vessel elasticity, is washing away things that are problems, including cancers and other diseases that are thought to be, you can only cure it with chemicals. Well, our bodies are meant to run properly. They're meant to to fix themselves and to work properly while we're alive. And so that then goes to what we put in our body as far as food matters. What we put inside our body for water as matters. If we drink water that's filled with fluorides and chlorine and other purifying chemicals, that's going to have an effect. How often are we drinking vortexed water that was coming down a stream that is structured properly and then turned into structured cell walls easily by our body? Because our body will create the the structured waters or the plasma, but how hard does it have to work in order to do that? So if we can get it in closer to the state it was intended to operate in our body, the better off we are. And so you can do that by leaving a glass of water out in the sun. The sun will structure the water, will create vortexes within the water. You can pour it over rocks. You can do mineralized rocks, and there's minerals that our body needs to operate properly. And so, even in the water that we drink makes a huge difference as to what we can do. But our culture of process everything because it's the cheapest way to do things, and it's what our body just needs calories. Oh, it just needs calories. Well, it will work with calories. It will work with processed foods and what we'll call garbage foods, but it doesn't work as well because it's not how your body has to work harder to get what it needs out of those processed things. And so if the second worldview is right, then the things that we eat that are closer to the way that God intended them to be eaten, the better off they are for our body. So things that come out of a tree are going to be better than things that come out of a tree and then go through a factory and then are added a bunch of sugar that came out of dehydrated corn and adding xylitol and glycophosphates and all sorts of other things to the food itself is going to be worse for the body, unless of course we came from a bunch of chemicals, in which case the chemicals would be better, which would be good. And if it doesn't work out, don't worry, just do a little bit of natural selection will take care of that. But the thing is, I don't want to die to make sure that my body works better. I would like it just to keep living. So by putting the things in it that are the way that God intended them to be, the better off our health is going to be. And by putting our bodies into an environment that more closely matches what the original creation would have been, of a higher oxygen, a higher carbon dioxide, higher infrared energy, higher electromagnetism, eating foods that are as close to the way that they're intended, the better. And by intended, of course, I mean the ones that, a cow is a wonderful creature and it produces wonderful food, as does a pig and a chicken and a lamb. But also a carrot and a beet and a strawberry and all these other wonderful things that come out of the ground from seeds into this fruit. Right now we're just outside Valencia, and all of the trees around us are filled with oranges and lemons and mandarins and clementines. And I mean, you pick one off a tree, open it up, and it's just the most amazing thing ever. Oh, well, good food is expensive. Okay, well, I'm going to argue that for a second. How much are you paying for all the drugs? Oh, well, they're covered by insurance. Okay, how much are all the rest of us paying for the drugs in order to keep you working properly? You say, oh, well, I can't afford good food. Well, you're affording food. You can afford good food. You can buy the grainy rice that hasn't been overprocessed instead of the white rice. You can drink good water that you make yourself instead of processed water out of the tap. That doesn't cost you anything. Sunlight's free still. I mean, if you live in an area where there isn't any sunlight, then you gotta be a bit more creative and structure the water a different way. But a bag of carrots isn't expensive. A bag of potatoes isn't expensive. But we've got this idea. Oh, that was the other thing I want to say, is that your brain operates on fats. The fuel for your brain is fat. And your brain, I heard it last night. I'm sorry if my numbers are off, but your brain consumes 40% of the calories that you eat, and its fuel is fat. And so if you're not eating enough fat, well, your brain's not going to work properly. You actually have to feed it fat in order to get it to work properly, to think properly. And people have been finding that an increase in fat in their diet and an increase in things that will soften the endothelial cells is actually bringing people back from things like Alzheimer's and dementia and brain problems, by feeding it the fuel that is intended to go there. But we've got this idea that fat is bad. Well, it's a wrong thought. The processed sugars are bad, but the processed other stuffs are bad too. But the processed sugars are probably one of the main problems, not the fats. So bacon and cream, and there was a study that came out a little while ago that people who drink coffee with cream on a daily basis live longer than people who don't. Interesting. So, the things that our culture has said, oh, well, that's bad for you. If you go back to the way that God intended it to be and you eat those things, you're going to do really, really well. If you go back to the way that God had intended this earth and the way for the people who live to be 950 years old and use some of those things, you discover that, that's actually the way it's supposed to work, and my body operates better within that. And so, when we approach our body from the way it was designed by the person it was designed by and the instructions that they give, and live our lives with joy and life and eating the fruits and the vegetables and the seeds as he's told us to eat, and the meats into the New Testament, we find that our body operates well. So then my body can operate without pain, with energy, with life, with joy. And it's a self-perpetuating cycle, because if I have joy, then my body works better, and my body works better, I have more joy. And then I have joy, and I transfer that to the people around me through the mirroring effect, and then it's reflected back at me, and that gives more joy, which makes my body work better, which gives me more joy, which makes me share joy more. And it's like we live in a world of vortexes. No matter how far out we go into space, we see spinning galaxies and solar systems and planets are all spinning. And then we look down in the molecular world and you see atoms spinning around each other, and electrons and neutrons changing the charge of things, which changes the chemicals. And then we see inside of our body, our heart is working in a spinning fashion in a vortex, and the water that we drink is a vortex and creates this beautiful hexagonal structure within the molecular makeup of the water. And when it works together, it's an incredible, beautiful design, and we're intended to live in this world without pain and with joy and with love and with other people. And so what you eat matters, what you drink matters, how you act matters, how you treat others matters. And then there's the muscular side of things. There's the, when things don't hurt, it's easy to build muscle, and you can do the activity. And by walking or running or biking or being up and doing and lifting, moves the blood through your body faster and better. And the faster and warmer your body, the faster your blood moves and the warmer your body is, the more junk that gets swept out of your veins and arteries, causing your blood to be able to move better through your body. It's a circular system of the more that we put in, the more we get out of it. And the more we get out of it, the more we want to put in of it. And so what that looks like to me now, I've been on this trend for 20 years. I'm 41. I got a bunch of gray hairs, but I feel like I'm 15 years old. I wake up in the morning with energy. I go to the bed with energy. I've got energy throughout the day. I know how to make my body operate as far as when things start to get low or they get too high. My heating and cooling system works. I hardly ever get sick because my immune system works great. I'm able to lift heavy things and build my muscles. I'm able to increase in flexibility. The muscle side of things is really interesting because the muscle pain is actually 90. I don't know the exact numbers. You can look at the work by Alma Ellis on this one, but I think it's something like 95% of the pain that happens in our body is due to muscle pain, muscular pain. It's not tearing. It's not damage. It's the pain that comes in the muscle, and that muscle pain is caused from shortened muscles or like. And what happens is that there's a lactic acid buildup in muscles that have repeated stress to them, repeated rebuilds that aren't cleaned out you shorten it builds up a lactic acid ball, also known as a knot, and it shortens the muscle. So if my muscle is, let's call it this long, if I've got a knot here, that a ball, and it's pulling the muscle in, well, it's going to shorten that muscle, which means that that muscle can't extend as much. And that is where most of the pain in our body is coming from muscularly. And so by learning how to break up those lactic acid balls or knots in our muscles allows that muscle to stretch properly. Well, here's the thing. Because our body is a system, if one muscle is short, it pulls on another muscle. And so we might be getting pain in a spot where there isn't the problem. So when I was playing professional golf, I had a problem in my back right here. And I went to see this muscular sports therapy guy, Al Milas, who works on lengthening muscles through the elimination of these lactic acid buildups. And my problem was actually in my chest on this side, on the front side of the chest, and my hip on my front part of my hip on my right side. And those muscles were both shortened from repetitive swinging of the golf club and were pulling on the muscle behind it, which was my back muscle. And then I did a weird motion. That muscle couldn't stretch any further, and there was damage in that muscle. And so the fix wasn't even in my back. The fix was in my hip and my chest. And so by understanding that your body is a system working together, your pain is probably not caused from the spot where it's actually exhibiting. It's somewhere else. And that's fixable. That's fixable through pressure and release muscle treatment to be able to break up lactic acid and stretch those muscles, extend those muscles, and make the pain go away from behind. And it's incredible. You can actually live pain-free. You can go through life in a wonderful way. And so I encourage you, figure out what health is for you. A friend of mine just said, I asked around, and she said, health is being able to do what you want, when you want, comfortably. And I think that's a pretty good definition. The thing is, I want to do so much, and I want to do it now, which means that I need to make sure my body is operating at the optimal possible way. And I have to mix that in with raising 2 kids and having a beautiful wife and a business and coaching others and bringing people up in their lives and getting what they want in life. And I have to do it in a way where it fits into the amount of time that I have in a day. And the good news is I figured out how to do that. I figured out how to manage what's going into my body, manage my energy levels, manage working out in my time of day, as well as helping my wife with homeschooling and running a business and coaching others and producing these lovely podcasts for you. So set your sights high, because it really is possible. You just got to think a little bit outside the box to figure out how you can do it in your life and what it means to run a body that acts more like a Ferrari than the Daihatsu Storia that we rented in Cyprus all those years ago on our honeymoon and barely made it from destination A to B. You want to drive the Ferrari. Till next time.